Senator Rob Garagiola, represent Western and Northern Montgomery County District 15. Been in the Senate now, it's my 7th session, and serve on the Senate Finance Committee. Well, I think this was a good example of where the business community came forward in a very united format and said there are some concerns with legislation that was enacted last year that needed some clarification, and I approach a lot of the problems that we have before us in the state of Maryland in a very pragmatic manner, and wanted to hear what the concerns were from the business community in the chamber and the leaders in the chamber who brought many of these businesses together to raise some of these concerns, and worked with the proponents of the legislation from last year in, I think, a very collaborative manner to try to get language that everybody was comfortable with, that maintained the intent of the legislation, but then ensured that there was clarity in how we would implement it. And the bottom line is we didn't want confusion, we didn't want unnecessary litigation over the legislation or the law in place, and so I thought it was important to get it right, and really enjoyed working with the Chamber of Commerce and the business community to get it right. We put the amendments together, met with other members of the Senate Finance Committee, and walked through these amendments with them, so there was a comfort level there. I know the Chamber reached out to the leadership in the House and the Senate. Obviously the bill's now passed through the Senate without much debate at all, although we had a few questions that did come up. Readily answered those questions, and it moved through the Senate and is now on the House floor this evening. Well, I think it's important to stay actively engaged, even on legislation that was able to move relatively easily through the Senate. Nothing's done until it's complete. So on any legislation, I would urge the Chamber, you always have to be very vigilant with this bill as well as with other legislation that the business community supports. It's now in the House Chamber. It'll be referred to the House Economic Matters Committee, and they're going to have a hearing over there, and would urge the business community to continue to express support for it and talk about it with members of the Economic Matters Committee so it can move through that committee as quickly as possible, and then through the House floor without amendment. And if it passes without amendment, it doesn't need to come back to the Senate, and it can go straight to the governor's desk for his signature, and upon his signature it'll become effective rather than having to wait until October 1, which is typically when legislation gets enacted.